When I came out of the Battle of Algiers, I was different. It's interesting how we keep changing in front of it. It's the same movie I watched, I'm 52 years old, so 35 years ago the first time. Same film, but I'm a different person, and the world is a different place. But unfortunately, it didn't change enough to where you would feel like maybe we'd be a little bit more enlightened.
It's the only film in the world that I wished I had directed. In the beginning, when I saw it, I didn't want to question the craft of it because I was so fully surrendered to its power and its poetry and its politics.
What you feel about this film depends upon where your politics lie. You know, this stuff can get very tricky. You say I'm a terrorist, but I'm saying I'm a liberator.
To make the history live is great. You can take what is a divided collective memory and try to make something dramatic. Our points of view could be skewered, our critics say, who cares? It's still honest to that point of view. So that's what history is, you know.
Battle of Algiers was a movie that you know, I stole stuff and made it ours. And that to me is just, you know, you're standing on the shoulders of people who came before you, and that's just part of the process. I wasn't embarrassed about it or secretive about it. You know, I made anybody who was involved with traffic, who I felt was really interested in how we were going to do it, watch Battle of Algiers and Z and French Connection and say, this is what we're doing.
I think what struck me was the sense of staging a documentary and making it look so casual, so real life. And that was the mode then. You know, Cassavetes was a very popular at film school. To do things naturalistically was the given. To cross the boundary between feature film, so to speak, the movie from Hollywood and the documentary style. Gilles Pontecorvo solved it, in a sense, in a big way.
It looks very much like if you saw the news in Iraq and you had a black and white television set, it looks like you could have seen this film right now. It's the same thing, and there's something very disturbing about that.
I mean, it seemed like somebody had a handheld Aton or Eclair. It was just 60 millimeter, just right in the middle of the stuff, shooting. At the end of the film, where they show the various uprisers, I still don't, I mean, all that stuff is staged, but I don't know how they did that.
They completely captured the, you know, raggedy edges of what protest is really like, you know, where it's a wave of people and then there's nothing and then there's more. I mean, it's not like so many movies one sees where you've paid for 2,000 extras and goddamn it, you're going to show them 2,000 extras.
It was really fascinating the way they filmed those bomb scenes. I mean, you see, this wasn't no green screen and blue screen right there. You see people right there and the bomb going off right behind them.
There used to be that title card on the front of the film that said not a single foot of this film is documentary, that it was all recreated, which is a pretty provocative thing to put at the front of a movie. But as it turns out, as you watch the film, it was a helpful thing to have. There are a couple of sequences which look very dangerous. I don't know if you could do them now.
He doesn't make anything feel precious, you know, and because nothing is treated preciously, it's actually completely captures the fire of the moment.
It's the kind of film you want to say to, whether it be young filmmakers or your children, this is like must reading. You know, this is like something you want to make movies, you should see that. You want to be an actor, you ought to see that. You want to think about how to put music with moving images, you ought to see that.
Any movie that starts with somebody being tortured, I mean, you sort of know from the get-go that you're in for a ride. And as a film goer, I really like that attitude on the part of the filmmaker, which is, you know, we're doing this, and either, you know, you can be into it or you can not be into it, but this is what we're doing and we're going to stick to it. So I really respond to that and feel like, well, I'll find my own handrail and I'll work my way through it because I'm really intrigued by what you're up to.
They put a face on a nation that was determined to gain their independence, to gain their freedom.
his intention to crystallize the Algerian revolution was certainly achieved. I mean, you knew where his heart, beat faster. And your heart went along with his, because he just took you there, and he captured the complexity and the power and the wisdom of the people who belong to this land.
Bearing in mind, especially in the West, that even as they succeed, and in watching the film, you certainly want them to succeed, that they will now be putting into place a culture that even in its most successful form is one that we have trouble wrapping our minds around.
I think what struck people was the fanaticism and unselfishness of the bombers, people willing to die for their cause. Except in that movie, they don't really plant the stuff on themselves. They plant it and get out, but they're willing to die.
Pontecorvo is so good in this film at sort of sketching people. Even the people that appear on screen for a couple of minutes really make an impression. When they go to get the bombs, the guy who makes the bombs seems like, you watch that scene and go, well, I can make a whole movie about that guy. Just look at him and the way he does things. And he's sketched like so beautifully in 60 seconds.
For me, the face is the map of life of a person, because I came from a cinema verite documentary tradition and then made fiction films and understood the power of real people and the sort of inexplicability of people's characters, that they inform the character so much when they come from a point of view of not being an actor, And Brahim Hagiag's performance as Ali Lapointe is a case in point. I mean, he is so in control over his environment, his centeredness and his innate confidence and his quietness and the power that amplified itself because of his quietness is stunning, But it was Pontecorvo who saw that he could give him that,
If you're not going to have all non-professional actors, and there are some actors in this film, you have to be very, very careful how you blend those two together, because you can find yourself tonally going in completely different directions within just a scene.
The democratic way that the one professional actor in the film, Jean Martin, acted opposite, all the other characters, it's a seamlessness, and that's what really filmmaking is also about,
I think what you have to do is put people in situations where they don't have to act, where they're just reacting to what's going on. I think when people are coming out of the Casbah and they're getting checked, they're really getting checked. They have to wait online, they have to walk through that. They understand certain things are going to happen to them and they accept that and they just fall into it. Usually you're finding people that are also have been through a certain situation like that, so they don't have to really imagine anything. One of the most effective aspects of the film had to do with the way music was in concert with the imagery. There is a moment where Algerians are being interrogated, and there's this organ music that comes on that is just about, I don't know how much people can really take, but when that comes on, I think that is like a knife piercing your skin.
His use of music was radical, where even the chanting, the ululating that happens in most places in the Middle East and in Africa, the how he took that sound and made it completely musical, and as it should be, really. But it was, so his music was not that type of superimposed soundtrack at all that made you manipulate you into feeling one way or another, but taking sometimes the mosaic of actual sound and making that into music. That was a huge influence for me.
There was one, it's like almost a funeral march, and I noticed this last night when I saw the film again, that they used the same cue for two different scenes. They use it when the French blow up the Casbah, a building, and then they use it again when the Algerians retaliate with their own bomb. So I think by using the same choice of music for both, you might say, atrocities, for me the filmmaker is saying, they're mourning the loss of life, period, on both sides.
After 9/11, I wanted everybody to see this movie. I wanted everyone to see that grief is something that has no nationality, that this kind of sadness of losing a child or losing family members is something that is universal. There's a lot of tragedy in the movie. I mean, and the way that the tragedy is shown, though, is in the most simplest kind of human situations of people just making bad judgments, people getting lost, slipping between the cracks in some way.
On the one hand, absolutely you sympathize with the Algerians, but at the same time, there's that fantastic sequence where the woman is in the bar and has set the purse down and is looking around at everyone in the bar, obviously thinking, in a few minutes, they're all going to be dead. I think a less balanced filmmaker might have skirted that issue, but Pontecorvo never does. I mean, he always makes it very clear that there's an incredible toll to these kinds of conflicts on both sides.
A friend of mine, a Frenchman, told me a story about how it was politically unbalanced, you see, because it always had the reputation for being a balanced movie. But, you know, Gillo did have a prejudice. And he said to me, you know, he never covered the massacres of the French people at such and such and such and such. Apparently there were some fairly significant massacres of French people.
There's a balance, but I still think that, I mean, it's obvious to me where the filmmakers, you know, at the end of the day, they're on the side of the Algerians. And in this case, I think that's the right side.
You know, so often films about Algiers or Africa or India or Asia is always with a white protagonist at the center of them. You know, that's how these films get financed, if they get financed at all. And so that's the usual norm. And this perspective of showing you really the interiority of Ali Lapointe as well as the French general is something that also makes for great drama, you know, and is not being done before, you know, that I've seen in such a successful manner. But to have a balanced perspective, I don't know if it is necessary. I mean, I love to have the confidence of showing one point of view too, you know, or favoring one point of view over another.
If you look at this film, the people of Algeria want to get out under the yoke of colonialism. And what's so strange is that the French, who had just went through World War II, and it's ironic, the guy's talking about, well, how can they call us fascists? We were members of the resistance and we just fought the Nazis, but they didn't have the understanding to see basically it's the same thing. You had these people you had them as a colonial state, and they wanted their freedom.
If you look at Battle of Algiers, you're going to find it's very relevant and resonant today. That what's going on in the world is basically that the chicken's coming home to roost. You can't keep the poor people of many of these nations in the hole as long as you do without expecting consequences.
Anytime you're in somebody else's land, in their country, and they don't want you there, and you were invited, I think that you could just look at the Battle of Algiers and see what you're in store for.
Making political films in the United States is just not something that filmmakers are encouraged to do, and I think there's a self-fulfilling prophecy that political films don't make money, which is what the business is about, ultimately. I just miss that era. The fact that in the 60s you had the Battle of Algiers and a couple years later you had Z, and they were both notorious, if not commercially successful. And like I said, I miss that. I miss that immediate connection between art and politics and life.
I would imagine to make a political film today, you could still get vast distribution outside the United States, but within the United States, it depends on what kind of film you're making and whose point you're telling, you know.
The only thing that anybody's scared about is, well, will anybody go? Because, you know, we'll lose money if they don't go. So maybe the artists need to just step forward and start making better movies about current subjects. Maybe it's our fault.
I still want to believe that if the film is brilliant enough and in control of itself and is telling a story dramatically and not just preaching to the converted, and also has in it sort of the music and power of real cinema making, then I still want to believe that I can find distribution for that film.
Because of the cheaper technology, because you can work with non-actors, and because if you can work in cheaper locations, you could make a film like this. And you could make it damn well. You could maybe make it on digital. And if you can give it the right look, I do believe it could be made. The question would be, what do you do with it?
The road to distributing even such a film probably would be triply more difficult than making it, today. But I still want to believe that it's possible, because if I don't believe if I believe it's not possible, it would be hard to wake up every day.
For me, the Battle of Algiers is for me, the great works, and not just film, but just the great works of art, stand the test of time.
It does everything that as a filmmaker you want a film to do. It works as a movie, it works as politics, it affects everyone who sees it in a very visceral way and makes them think differently about a certain situation. Pontecorvo sort of, he just hit the bullseye, basically.
I think that there are moments in certain films where they transcend what the subject matter is. They transcend the way the thing is shot. It just leaves you with a feeling, a density of experience that alters you in some way, and you carry that with you.